council meeting of June 12th, 2023. If you would, please silence your phones and any other devices. And we are under new rules where people are welcome to come speak to us during the public period, but if you would please fill out a speaker's card before you do, we appreciate it. Let's start this evening with a moment of silence, and in that moment of silence, let's keep in our memory Linda Frosch, council member who recently passed away. Let's think for a moment. In recognition of Councilmember Frosch, we have several people here this evening who would like to perhaps have some memories of her and they can share with us. And you don't need a speaker card for this part. So, Mr. Schieferdecker, former Mayor Schieferdecker, would you please sure come up to the podium?
Be happy to. Good evening, Council and Lounge. That's sad being here tonight to celebrate the life of Linda Frosch. We recently lost her. She was a fellow lover of Maitland and servant to our community. She served 2 full terms on Maitland City Council from 2008 to 2014. During 2 of those years, she was also served as our vice mayor. Our present mayor, John Lowndes, and myself, both served with her on city council for a number of those years, witnessing her fierce dedication and passion. While she held office, she had several noteworthy accomplishments, a few being the creation of Friends of First Response Maitland, an organization committed to supporting our police and firemen. Another was assisted in acquiring the Maitland Art and History Center designation as a National Historic Landmark. She also supported development of our downtown fire station, new City Hall, as well as several private downtown development projects. Along with those accomplishments, I particularly appreciated her perspective and insight during one of the most difficult economic periods in our nation's history, the recession between 2008 and 2012, during which our city faced financial challenges. Throughout that period, she was an integral part in making several strategic financial decisions to keep Maitland moving forward. Maitland has much to be thankful for from Linda Frosch. Our thoughts and prayers go out to her husband, Mark, daughter, Elizabeth, and the rest of her family during this excruciatingly painful time. Thank you.
Thank you, Howard. Mayor Kitts?
Doug Kitson, 1151 Cobra Trail. Mayor, council, everybody here. This is a time, and Howard laid out a lot of what Linda had done, but she, as I start things out, she was critical to the future direction of the city of Maitland. And I know that personally and directly, because in 2004, there's probably people here who don't remember this. In 2004, the voters of the city of Maitland decided and approved the construction of a new police station, fire station, and city hall. I don't know if Linda was even thinking about being a member of council in 2004, but that's when it started. In 2006, the direction of the city, and in particular our downtown, because the police station over on the other side had already been started, but the direction of the downtown was really in question. The voters had approved the construction of the design and construction of the public facilities, but it was really our downtown, what was going to happen with the rest of our downtown that was very much in question. I got involved and was fortunate enough in 2006 to be elected to council. And just because of the direction that the downtown was going at that time. And in 2007, going along the timeline, that's when we knew what was happening with the economy, but we had to elect the architect and the engineer for the city hall and the fire station. It was $800,000, and I knew if we didn't get it done, it wasn't going to get done. That was 2006, 2007. 2008, Howard referenced it. It was one of the worst economic times in the history of the U.S. And that's the year that Linda Frosch went to council. It was 2008. So my concern with City Hall and the fire station was basically, we got the 3 votes to put the $800,000 for architects and engineers in place, but was it going to stand? Because the economic situation across the city of Maitland. One of the things, and I'll never forget it, that Linda did is during the year 2008, she was one of the quickest learners I ever knew. Because she had to know the budgets. I mean, it took me 2 years to figure out the budgets. She had to know the budgets in and out because of the decisions that had just been made prior to her coming to council. And so we got through that year in a major part with respect to her involvement in education, quick education. And from 2008 to 2011, Linda was on council and kept the ball rolling. She was the type of person that, I mean, when I was up there and I said something that really didn't go along the lines that she was thinking, she'd make a joke out of it and laugh. And I knew when I heard the laugh, I better get my act together. Because she was very vocal and she didn't hold back, and she knew how to guide and direct, not just council, but the city of Maitland. In 2011, I left office under a situation where there were developers who were trying to develop everything around where a city hall and fire station would be developed. When I left, and I really didn't have much of a choice because we already had the direction set, I had to count on people like Linda to keep the ball rolling. And the neatest thing for me, and nobody in this room knows this, is that I could call her directly because I was outside of the sunshine laws. And those were some of the most important conversations I ever had with respect to the city of Maitland. There were conversations with her. We didn't always agree, but she always listened. And this is the important part, took action. Always listened and took action. So over the next 3 years, she was the one that thought through and articulated what needed to be done for the city of Maitland. There's probably nobody in this room who knows this better than Howard sitting right here because of some of the options that were going to happen to our park directly next door. It was really Linda Frosch as a primary element to what protected the history of our city. And just as I sit here today, the voice of the people of the city of Maitland, not just council members, not just people who come to council, but the voice of the people of the city of Maitland came out every time Linda Jane Frost. So, God bless her family. God bless her. God bless Sharon. God bless everything about her. Thoughts and prayers with her family, with all of us throughout the city.
Thank you, Mr. Kenson. Anybody else like to say a word or two? Well, I appreciate those kind of words, and I've briefly overlapped with Linda Frost on council, and I remember her very well, and she was one of those bigger-than-life people who was smart and articulate and had an opinion, and we were lucky to have her service on council, and our thoughts are with Dr. Round. I remember that afterwards they had started up a charity for the Maitland first responders, and Dr. Round and Linda put together a kickball tournament over at Fennel Road on the baseball diamonds. And it was a huge success. Lots of people came out. Lots of people gave money. Lots of people got injured. People should be playing kickball in their 30s, 40s, 50s. But she had Maitland in her heart, and we appreciate all of her time up here and our thoughts and prayers with you. So thank you. And if you would now please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge of Allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good morning, sir. How are you? Good. How are you? All right. I have a proclamation for emergency medical services, and I'd like to read it and present it to the fire chief. Whereas emergency medical services is a vital public service, and whereas the members of emergency medical services teams are ready to provide life-saving care to those in need 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and whereas access to quality emergency care dramatically improves the survival and recovery rate of those who experience sudden illness or injury, and whereas emergency medical services has grown to fill a gap by providing important out-of-hospital care, including preventative medicine, follow-up care, and access to telemedicine. And whereas emergency medical services system consists of first responders, emergency medical technicians, paramedics, emergency medical dispatchers, firefighters, police officers, educators, administrators, pre-hospital nurses, emergency nurses, emergency physicians, trained members of the public, and other out-of-hospital care providers. And whereas members of the Maitland Fire Rescue Department engage in thousands of hours of specialized training and continuing education to enhance their life-saving skills. Now, therefore, I, John P. Lowndes, by virtue of the authority vested in me as the mayor of the city of Maitland, Florida, in recognition of this event, do hereby proclaim the week of May 21st through 27th, 2023, as Emergency Medical Services Week. And we're very proud and lucky to have our emergency medical teams with us. Maitland is, bar none, one of the best places to be and one of the most safest and well cared for places. And that's good to be one. Would you like to say something?
Sure. I just want to say these great men and women strive every day to make a difference. Oh, sorry, Mr. Mayor, Council. We strive every day to make a difference in our community, and we wouldn't be able to do that without the support of our medical director, Dr. Todd Husty, and council. So we just want to thank you for your support, and we appreciate it. And we won that kickball tournament. I just want to make that out. So thank you so much. I appreciate it.
On to the agenda now. Any old business? Mark, do you have any old business to report?
No, sir.
Okay. Consent agenda. Does any member of council wish to pull any item from the consent agenda? Seeing none, does anybody from the public have comments on consent items 2 through 5? Seeing none, we'll close public comment period, and a motion will be in order.
I'll move to approve.
Second.
All right, we have a motion, we have a second. Lauren, would you please call the roll?
Councilmember Guthrie.
Aye.
Councilmember Hall Harrison. Aye. Councilmember Wurzel. Aye. Councilmember Wild.
Aye.
Mayor Lowndes.
Aye. Okay, public period. Now is the time that anybody can address council on any item that's not before or not on the agenda this evening, so please come on up. And first, we have a speaker card, which matches our speaker, Stacy Larson.
That's it. I hope so anyway. I am Stacy Larson, the director of the Maitland Public Library. I feel like it's been an extremely long time since I saw y'all. Things have changed since then. It's summer. Our summer reading program has kicked off officially for both kids and adults. We started June 1st. We had a marvelous kickoff with a magician for the kids, and then we had a tea party for the adults. But just because you missed the kickoff does not mean there is not still cool stuff to do. So I just want to give you some highlights, invite you to come. Even if you do not still have small people in your lives, there's still cool stuff for you. So I want to say first, throughout the summer, we are having a Cooking with First Responder event. This happened last Monday for the month of June. We're not really advertising it heavily, and we still had 155 people. So I just would like to thank the police and firefighters who came to our story time, brought their trucks. A great time was had by all. There will be more of those throughout the summer, so just watch our calendar, not our social media. This week we will have our Fresh for Kids cooking program. It will be a blind taste test, so kids will be tasting all kinds of different things with some pretzel sticks and seeing if they can identify it, sort of like the blind taste test on Hell's Kitchen, but nicer. We also have Mr. Harley coming for music. He's an old favorite of ours. We haven't had him in a few years, but he's got a new record, so he will be with us on Thursday. And then next week, and this is the coolest thing, if you have seen the Enola Holmes movies on Netflix, they are based on a young adult mystery series, the Enola Holmes Mysteries, which are written by Nancy Springer, who lives here in Central Florida. And so we have talked to Mrs. Springer, and we have permission to do an official Enola Holmes escape room. So, you know, it's not like one of those where you have to pretend we don't have the copyright. She's given her blessing to this. It's officially an Enola Holmes escape room. It will start with a book club session on Tuesday at 4 o'clock, not tomorrow, but a week from. And then Tuesday evening, starting this Saturday, and then 2 more dates in July, families will have an opportunity to come try to escape our escape room. You need to register for that because we're doing it in small groups, but as of this morning, I know there were still some spots available Saturday. So call the library, reserve your spot for the Enola Holmes escape room. It's suitable for 9 and up. So you can bring all of those people. In 2 weeks' time, we will have stories with Little Bella's Animal Farm. So if you have ever wanted to have story time with a bunny rabbit, this will be your opportunity. Keep a look out on our calendar. We do have health and wellness, cooking, and craft programs for grown-ups as well. Those are all typically in the evenings. Our kids' events every single Thursday at 2 o'clock, and the Enola Holmes escape room, sometimes evening, sometimes Saturday, sometimes afternoon. So there's all kinds of spots on our calendar. Please check the calendar, maitlandpubliclibrary.org, or just give us a call at the library. Thank you.
Right. Thanks, Stacy. And we have Mr. Dale McDonald.
Evening, everybody. Dale McDonald, 108 Tangelo Court. I wanted to take the opportunity to compliment. I had an opportunity to sit through the y'all strategic planning workshop, And I found it to be, I've attended, how many groups? A dozen maybe over the years. And I found it to be probably the most constructively formatted of those that I've ever seen. I was taken aback by how much candor that the back and forth and the discussions, open discussions, when y'all actually have a chance to meet together. The city manager made dozens of great points regarding the nature of, I think he had pointed out as part of that we had 50, at the time, 57 open positions with the city. Now, I don't know how that's changed since. If it's gotten better or worse, don't know. But the realities are there was also discussions about the recent, I keep wanting to call it a bonus, but maybe it's not a bonus, a 6% bump for was it our first responders, or was it the employees at large, which was actually a savings of all that we didn't spend in the past fiscal year. So it doesn't move us past the fact that it's going to cost more for the level of service that we ask for and have every right to expect from our city staff. They need to be paid better, because it's always, at the end of the day, going to be about money. And we have spent, well, at least the last 30 years that I'm aware of, operating at that lowest common denominator of what we could get people to agree to work for. That's not going to cut it in the future. And I think we talked a little bit about that. A median range of anywhere from 25 to 50% of what other municipalities might be paying. And I'm tickled to death to hear today that we may have actually hired a stormwater lakes director. It's been a couple of years of our most blessed assets in this city. And we've finally gotten around to seriously in finding someone that wants to work for what we're willing to pay. So, again, I want to thank Mark for doing a format that actually encouraged real back and forth with council people. I'm not a big fan of, as all of you I think are aware, that where y'all speak individually with senior staff. I think there's value to be gained, and Johnny and I'll speak more about this again. But those kind of open discussions are beneficial to the communication for the whole group. And again, wanted to commend Mark and all of you for participating as you did in that. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Dan.
Are you gentlemen for public period?
Yes.
Okay. You go ahead and bring us your cards. Thank you. Whichever wants to go first, just state your name and address, please.
Hello, everyone. I'm Adam Smith. I live at 960 Gamewell Avenue. I haven't been to one of these meetings in years, but a couple of my neighbors were just talking to me the other day. It's been raining a lot recently, and our neighborhood is known for extreme flooding. And when I used to come in here, when I first bought my first house on Gamewell, water went directly into my driveway. And I came and raised concern about all this. And I did some research, and I found out there was a QMP that was approved in 2002. And all the neighbors came, and they were all talking about how this should have been approved, it should have happened by now, and then they said it was because of the recession. And now I see all these QMP projects happening, and other neighbors that were just approved that just started a year or two ago. And they're already getting new sidewalks, new drainage in Domrick or other parts of Maitland. And I want to know, what can we do if this whole entire QMP project was approved in 2002, the whole study? What do we do to get that pushback in line? Be on schedule. It's not online for the next 2 or 3 years, I don't think, from the projected schedule, and I want to know what we can do about that. And I was even trying to find some information about the approval, you guys even took it off your website. So I looked at it like a year or two ago because it had a link. I went on the website now, there's nothing even about Greenwood Gardens on your whole entire website. So they removed the whole entire QMP from all of your website. The other question I wanted to ask about is, we have some woods at the end of Gamewell that has, it's like a park, and kids playing there all the time, but it's been heavily overgrown now. They used to come and clear it out every year or so. I've been calling the Public Works Department, and they came out there 6 months ago, put marks on the trees that they were going to keep, and they said, oh, we're going to get this cleaned out. Nothing's ever happened. Now, there's homeless people. I don't know what's going on with the homeless situation in Maitland, but it is getting really, really bad. And either myself or my neighbors or people who live on my street, even outside of Greenwood Gardens, or my friends are telling me that they're seeing homeless people all over the place. I don't know what's being done. The cops told me the other day when they came, there was a guy with a machete in those woods talking to himself. And the police officer told me that, I guess, the charter school that was demolished, that there was a camp over there, that they went over there personally and broke down and tore down this camp to try to get some of these homeless people to go in. I guess now they're coming underneath the I-4 underpass and going into the woods. But I'm just starting to see a lot of homeless people all over the city recently. And now, since I see them in those woods, it makes me pay attention, and I'm starting to see it a lot. So I just wanted to know if you guys could talk about what's going on with the homeless situation.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Smith.
My name's Kevin Maloney. I live at 910 Gamewell Avenue. Same thing, just there's been a dramatic increase in homeless people. I drive down Maitland Avenue. Seems like there's people sleeping under just about every business over there. I was at the Quinn Park with my kids probably 2 months ago, and there was a person strung out on every single bench in that entire park. And so I just want to see if you guys noticed it. Do you guys have any plans how to handle it? The flooding too, my driveway floods anytime it rains. I'm in site construction. You can tell when the neighborhood is built, the aprons were not built correctly. I don't think any of them were built to code correctly. So kind of want to get your thoughts on that, but the homeless situation is kind of really why I'm here. So.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Maloney. Is there anybody else? Okay, let's close the public period. And I guess, I'd like to address your concerns, but we don't have the information really in front of us to address your concerns. I want you to know that we're thinking about your concerns.
But have you noticed it? Have you noticed it downtown when you're driving around, walking around?
I haven't noticed personally that much difference, really. So, yeah. But that's not to say it's not happening. Certainly, I've heard other people talk about it. I just personally haven't seen it. Mark, do we? Let's take these things one at a time. Okay, we can give you a brief view of what we know, and then. But since we don't again have the information, we're prepared tonight to talk about it. We'll take your information. We'll discuss it and certainly get back with you and keep you informed. But the QNP project, I think mainly if the concern is the drainage over there, I think that is on our CIP to look at the design for how to deal with the drainage. And that, I believe that study has been done, Mark, is that correct?
Yes. Yeah,
okay.
We discussed that at the strategic planning session. The fact that we did the analysis, there is not a positive outfall there, so we have to regroup and go back and do some redesign work to look at putting the stormwater system underground to at least address our level of service with 10-year storm in the roadway. So that's in process right now, along with the other flooding issues that we talked about, reprioritizing flooding over stormwater treatment based on what we learned from Hurricane Ian.
Right. And the QNP, just as a kind of point of history, the QNP projects or QNP programs were an idea that was around in the early 2000s, and it was our community development director at the time. It was his brainchild, And there were several. There was in your neighborhood, Greenwood Gardens. There was one in my neighborhood, Domerick. And ultimately, I think I'm correct when I say this, nothing ever happened with any of them, mainly because they weren't brought all the way through to maturity. Then there was the 2008 recession. There was just no way to fund it. So I tell you, I know personally because I hear it from my neighbors all the time, and they, people in Domerick are saying, we had a QMP, we had all these things going on, whatever happened to it? And the answer was really that the QMP, it was an idea that never really got consummated. So it wasn't that it was ever a project that we had funded, that the city, no city council ever funded any project on any QMP, to my knowledge. Before it was overcome by events. That's not to say that a lot of those projects don't get done. So in Domerick, and I know that sidewalks have been put in, not all the sidewalks that were on the QMP. There was, street lighting that was supposed to happen, that didn't happen. There was, undergrounding that was supposed to happen, that didn't happen. It's basically, it just never actually occurred. So the QA, that may be why it's not on the website, because it's really not a thing, and it just never happened. And I think about 2008, 2010, it was just we realized that we didn't have the funds for it, and so it just got scuttled. Those projects now, to the extent that we need them, like we're talking about drainage or undergrounding. I know Greenwood Gardens got undergrounded. I don't believe that was a QMP deal. That was just a CIP deal, right?
It was in the QMP. But
it was in the QMP, but it was ultimately funded by. It made its way onto the list, the capital improvements projects list, and it got funded that way. Domerick sidewalks, same way. So there's other ways of getting to the same place, I guess is what I'm saying. So the QMPs themselves, when you go back and look at them, they're beautiful. They have great drawings. They have wonderful amenities. None of them ever got implemented. And so what we're doing now is implementing them by the CIP process, one at a time, not one at a time, as many as we can get on the CIP and pay for them going forward. And so it's an annual look at what we do and prioritizing what we're doing. And so that's kind of a brief history of the CIP. Mark, did I get that roughly correctly?
Yeah.
And as far as the homeless, and I think to address your issue on the parks back there, I know there's a passive park back there right up against the slip ramp. And that is something we need to take care of. If we indicated we're going to go clear out the park, then we got to go clear out the park. The homeless issue, I don't really know, if we have a plan about that, or to the extent that we've been hearing more complaints about that. That's something we just need to hear from you all and to hear from people in the community and let us know it's a problem, and then we'll start reviewing our options on how to deal with that. But we appreciate you coming up and voicing that. So now we got this is a way that we can take care of it. So anyhow, thank you for coming, and we will. And if certainly you've got all these concerns, we'll deal with our city manager here and department heads as necessary to inform you about where we're headed and what's next. So, thanks, Rick. All right. We are on to the decision items now. The first decision item is the city clerk evaluation and compensation. Mark, would you like to introduce that item?
Sure. As you know, Lori's been with us now. It feels like it's been about a year and a half, actually. So we're a little bit tardy in doing her evaluation. We solicited the evaluation form. We sent the evaluation forms out to City Council to provide them back to us. I think it's pretty clear that based upon the tally sheet that I put together, you all think that she's doing an outstanding job with taking over from our longtime city clerk, Maria, after she retired. Average in the high fours as far as performance goes out of 5, so an outstanding evaluation. So, what we will typically do with these evaluations is discuss What I think many of you have discussed individually, Lori, what the expectations are as far as next year, what she's done well this year, and the improvements that you like and have seen over the years. So based upon that, you would discuss amongst yourself what an appropriate adjustment would be to her salary based upon that performance. We're looking back over the last year and a half now. It's an annual evaluation. We're going to start syncing these up in December, so Lori and I are going to be evaluated at the same time. So after this evaluation, we'll be syncing these up for December to deal with them at the first of the year. So really amounts to having discussion among the City Council on what increase is merited by Ms. Hollingsworth based upon her past year's performance. If you have any questions for me regarding specific performance issues, I can certainly answer those. We work very closely in getting agendas out to you, dealing with public records requests, dealing one-on-one with the City Council as concerns arise. So I would certainly agree with your collective evaluations of the City Clerk. It would be similar to an evaluation I would provide to her.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Does anybody have any comments or questions, Mark? Or Lori?
Well, I want to, of course, commend Lori for putting her arms around this role and taking it on and really making it her own. I think she's done a phenomenal job of coming in here and giving some structure and some order to things that perhaps were overlooked or needed some modernizing, and we've really brought some great additions to the team as well, which are thanks to Lori. My understanding, and this is from discussions with Mark, was that, you know, when people come on to an organization, you know, we all have jobs, right? We have to negotiate salaries, and that my understanding is that when Lori came on, she accepted a lower starting salary, which was based on a certain assumption that at some point after an evaluation, her salary would be brought up to market rate based on performance and getting to where she needed to be. So understanding from my conversation with Mark what that number was and where that number needs to be, I think that an increase of 10% would get us to where Lori needs to be for her salary, not only to be a reflection of our satisfaction and our optimism about her performance going forward, but also to bring her up to what is commensurate with other clerks around the state and what she should be paid for the role she's in. So I would start the bidding at 10%, but I think that based on our conversation, my conversation with Mark, that seems to be a number that would probably get us where we need to be.
Okay.
Well, I have a similar understanding from similar conversations I've had with Mark in terms of my, I've spoken with Lori about my comments. I guess they're in there. If you can guess which ones. They're the longest. If that surprises anyone. But I have not only, you know, doing the job, but also taking initiative to like see where there's holes and need to improvement. I know that we have a similar love of structure and predictability for a uniform application of rules. And so I appreciate that. And in addition to the things that Ms. Harrison is saying in terms of the sort of tacit understandings, assuming certain performance upon hiring. Also, as we talked about a lot, including the strategic planning, the overall and general salary studies, the comparative salary studies that are being done, and a lot of the conversation I had with Mark was based upon you know, understandings about what that seems to be showing as well in terms of what would be done anyway under the priorities we've expressed. So the number that seemed to make sense to me, again, from my conversation with Mark on those similar topics, was also 10%.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Well, I'm in agreement with that. I'm impressed by Lori, your take charge, attitude on a lot of items, including cemetery and other things, just things that you can see that need to be done and go out and do them. We're glad you're here, and obviously are knocking it out of the park as far as evaluation goes. So I think a significant raise is in order. Anybody like to open it up to the public? That's what I'd like to do. Anybody from the public? Yes, I think.
I did fill out a card.
That's okay. We can. I think there may be one in the podium. Doris, is it green light on there?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Your voice is so soft, I just didn't know sure if it was on.
I'm standing on my head. Doris Howe. Anyway, I just wanted to say that as a member of the public and an occasional volunteer for the Queen City, and the opportunity to work with Lori on a number of occasions, it's been a delight, and she does a marvelous job. So whatever you're going to do for us, the rose colors, just take it.
Thank you, Ms. Howard.
You're welcome.
Where are you gonna go?
You were,
I didn't fill out a card for this.
We'll put you down a couple times too.
Thank you. Dale McDonald, 108 Angelo Court. And again, I wanted to thank Mark, just in your long-term planning session, because I thought I was listening to me talk up there. And I appreciated that. We have been historically, maybe I should use the word frugal, over the last 30 plus years in what we're willing to pay our staff for the level of, thank you, Vance, for the level of service that our mouths say we expect and we deserve. It's time to pay people better. Getting to a 4-day work week only begins to scratch the surface. It'd be interesting to know that when we began the 4-day work week, how many openings did we have then versus the 57 that Mark brought to your attention in that strategic planning session? Is it actually helped? You know, we don't, I mean, I don't. Of course, again, I'm not as privy as I once was. Are we actually improving what we're trying to improve? The insurance benefits, the other things that we try to do to help. At some point in time, we have to come to the understanding that these folks are too important. And I've been very kind in saying how much I appreciated finding a Stormwater Lakes person after years of ignoring it for all practical purposes. Our most greatest blessing in this city. Lori has taken indulges me more than I deserve. And that the fact remains is, I'm willing to, as a citizen, and I've talked about this many times, I'm willing to pay more. Okay? And I don't really care who's upset with me on Facebook. The idea that we can ask for and expect a level of performance, a standard of excellence that we have every right to expect. We just don't want to pay for it. Now, which is a great opportunity, and I can't thank Mark enough for bringing this to y'all's attention. It's 4.3456 or whatever the millage rate's been for since I was 6 feet tall. That those days are gone. We can't afford to be that frugal any longer. The city deserves it. And somebody's got to lead it. And that's y'all. Thanks.
okay, thank you, Dale. Anybody else from the public? Like to address this? Seeing none, let's close the public hearing. And
I just wanted to add that it was, I think, following Maria is tough, just from somebody who's been here for so long, and I do want to commend you for kind of doing it your own way. I think that's one of those things that when you have somebody here for so long, it's nice to see. And I also enjoy seeing your family out. I think it's nice too when you have somebody come in and I see you and your family at different events. It's nice. So glad you're here. But I like the family side of it. So I like having them in your family. See your events. So, yeah.
Okay. How does everybody feel about wrapping all that up?
I will make a motion for, what is this? A motion to approve a one-time 10% raise of Lori's salary. And something about the evaluation, we have to, retroactive, yes, of course, to, what are we doing, January 1st, was that what it said?
You're going to move to approve the salary increase. I think what you're saying.
Oh, I wasn't even
10%.
looking at the thing, was I? No.
Retroactive to January 1st, 2023.
No, that's why
what
there's
I
an
think.
agenda report.
That's what I heard.
It wasn't a creative writing project, but here I am.
And I second her motion.
I
thought I was helping out.
You did great.
What I heard was I thought there was a motion and a second for a 10% salary. Retroactive
To
the
January
of
1st, 2023.
Okay.
That was all exactly what we said.
All right.
We got there.
Okay, we have first our motion and second. Laura, would you please call the roll?
Yes, thank you very much. Councilmember Hall Harrison.
Yes.
Councilmember Wurzel. Aye. Councilmember Wild.
Aye.
Councilmember Guthrie.
Aye.
Mayor Lowndes.
It's unanimous. Aye. All right. Great.
Evaluation. Thank you.
I always think it's awkward doing like that. Super awkward.
I believe that's it for our discussion, or the decisions. And we're into discussion line. Urban Land Institute. And we discussed this last time.
At the May 8th, and we were short a council member.
We were short a council member, so we hardly felt qualified to move ahead. But Vance, would you want to?
Sure,
take
yeah.
it away?
So the ULI Institute, the public workshop, has been something that we've done here, I think, since I was on planning and zoning and planning and zoning, I did it twice. And it's a good way to find out if you're not into, development, what the latest is going on in cities and how they're being built, and it really is a good workshop. I think it's almost a full day, and you bring everybody in. You bring in city council, planning and zoning, city staff, and it just is a refresher to say, listen, this is what's going on out in the world. And I think since I talked to somebody the other day and they said, oh, this is not the same one that you did a few years ago. Now it's been updated. So the style and the trends now have been updated to this. So I think it's good for us to especially with planning and zoning, to bring them in and really get an understanding from an outside source other than, just always going to Dan, what do you think? What do you think? We can have a little mix, and I think it's a good way to update everybody.
And it's a good thought. I'm glad you brought it. And I think I wasn't here for the earlier one. I understand it was a very useful for people. And it's now it's a full day, right, Mark? It was a half day before a full day. And so, I think the idea that my understanding from this is not a decision item, but my understanding from my take home from last time was it's a good idea. It may be a long day, and it might be a lot of money, and perhaps it's couldn't, it was not an overwhelming desire to do it, as I remember, but we didn't want to make that decision without Lindsay being part of it. And, you know, are you familiar with how this went forward? I mean, the ULI actual game funding?
I got to participate in the last one.
Okay, all right. So you know more than I do. Do you have any thoughts on it at all, or I hate to put you on the spot like that, but
You just did.
But I just
Well, you just did.
I don't hate it that much.
No, that's fine. I mean, it was an interesting exercise for what it was worth. Do I feel like I got anything out of it that would really be improve my current abilities and perspectives of what I can currently do on council? I don't know that that would necessarily be something I would elect to do again, only because we are a group up here of people who have, I would think on whole, a really good background in understanding urban planning. I think because of, you know, we've got people who are formally on planning and zoning. We have, you know, attorneys who practice in real estate law. I think we've got a good understanding really of the basics, and as much as it was an interesting exercise, I don't see any value in spending that kind of money on what really feels like a boondoggle. So, and also I don't have an entire day of my life to devote to something like that. So if this was something that people want to pay for and do on their own, I think that that sounds like a fun project, but I'm not in favor of us spending council money and the city's money at this time when we are already strapped to try and spend it on really important projects, for us to be spending money to give to ULI for them to come in and do, you know, a school project. So that's my thoughts.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. Vance, do you have anything else, or would you? I mean,
I think ULI might take a little offense to calling it a school project, but yeah. Yeah, I understand. Yeah, some of us do have the background and some of us don't. Some people on planning and zoning, you know, I mean, come in and they dab in it, but they don't have, you know, everyday, you know, they don't use it every day. They might be in a different field. They might be in real estate, you know, so I don't think they really dab in it as much. So, and I can see right now, I can probably tell we're not going to go forward with it, but I just thought it was, informative, especially when, you know, you're trying to, you want to make this the best city you can, even if you got a little small something that helped us in the future. I think it was well worth it for the betterment of the city, but, you know, I understand if y'all don't want to, so I don't take any offense to it, so with not doing it.
Right. Well, and again, I appreciate you bringing it up, man. I think it's anytime we have an opportunity for more professional education, I think we should think about it. So I appreciate you bringing it. Let's go to the next discussion item, driveway design standards. And this was an item that I'll go ahead and speak to it since I brought it up. Lots of people, I'll try to make this brief, lots of people have paver driveways these days. And if you walk around your neighborhood, you notice where those pavers go. Most often, almost always, they go right to the edge of the street. And we have implemented a new policy, I think in the last 6 months, that says that the pavers, if you're going to put pavers in your driveway, you can only do it to the edge of the right-of-way. And the edge of the right-of-way will vary in your yard pretty considerably, I think. But you know, 2 people approached me about it, and their right-of-ways probably were, one was 11 feet, and one was more than that, I think. But it was closer to 15. But that's not clear. So what that ends up being is, you get to paver, half or 2/3 of your driveway. The rest of it all has to be concrete. So and the idea, of course, is in concept it's good because that saves the city money and hassle when if the city has to go in and tear up pipes that are underneath the pavers along the driveway, laterally along the right of way. It's much easier to take that up and replace it with concrete than it is to do the finer work that pavers demand. And so it's cleaner, it's easier, it's a standard that is simple. But I think that the application of it ends up being that, there's a couple of residents have come to me and said, why would I look at my neighbors, they all have these pavers that go to the street, you're going to make me start a driveway that's, halfway up, and why do I have to lay 10, 12, 15 feet of concrete, the first part of my driveway? It would look silly next to the other ones, and they don't like the look, they think it devalues the value of their homes, and it's out of place, and so that's the complaint that I've heard. I think that my suggestion would be that we go back to a policy that takes the driveway, that allows people to put more paver down, but protects the city's ability to take them up or not take them up, but to access its infrastructure underneath the driveways without undue cost or time. And so there's a provision in the current standards which says you have to come to the right-of-way edge. And I can tell you that on my street, my right-of-way edge is about 15 feet from the street. So if I were going to lay a paver driveway today, I would have to stop, and it would be half driveway and half paver and half not. Across the street, I think it's even worse. I think those folks would be, because I remember when the city was planning to do a sidewalk on that side of Choctaw, they instead put it on my side. They engineered it around the trees through my neighbor's yard, and it ended up the sidewalk was going to be closer to their kitchen window than it was the street. So that's how far a right-of-way can come into your yard. The exception to the rule is if there is a sidewalk, you can take your pavers all the way down to the edge of the sidewalk, regardless of where the right-of-way edge is. So if your sidewalk is, like mine, 5 feet from the edge of the street, then you can paver down to the 5 feet line rather than the 15 feet long. So it seems to me that it would make the neighborhoods look nicer. I don't think it would burden the city that much to adjust the policy to allow the pavers to go down to within 5 feet of the street. Mark, I've talked to you about this. I bet you heard some about this because my ear's been bent on it as well. So did I capture it correctly for the city's point of view?
Yeah, absolutely. And if I can add, Mayor?
Please do.
Typically for a discussion item, we would put a lot of work into this, but this is a little bit more complicated. This is one of a true policy decision for the city council. So Kim and her staff did a little extra research on it, and we surveyed the other cities. So this is not an uncommon situation. We put the policy in place for our public projects as we're doing the sidewalks, as for moving forward with all the sidewalk projects and all the water and sewer projects. We're just where we put sidewalks down, we're laying concrete aprons. It was more consistent, it was easier to describe that to the contractors, easier to get pricing on. I think what, as the mayor and I have discussed, where we come into a little bit more of a problem is the individual driveways, where you don't have that project associated with it, where it's just a sidewalk through a front yard to the road. And we did start implementing that piece of it 6 months ago, and we have been getting feedback on that it doesn't seem to make sense. So we surveyed other communities. It is pretty commonly done in other communities. The weaknesses we have had in the past with it is that we have the owner sign a paver letter, that's what we call it, that says, yeah, we know we're putting these in the city right away, and we'll take them up if you ever need to come in here and do this, and it won't be your responsibility. Paver letters are just letters kept in a file, so as subsequent owners come through, they don't know anything about a paver letter. We have to dig through a file. It's not a recorded document. So our recommendation is if you choose to move forward on this, that we actually amend the code to describe what will be allowed and what isn't allowed, and that we get with Cliff or Drew, we'll call Drew, since Drew's sitting here, we'll get with Drew and put together a recordable document where the city and the property owners sign off on it, so if anybody cares to do a title search, it shows up that there is responsibility of the property owner if the city has to come in. We're not giving up any of our rights to our right-of-way, we're allowing them to use that, and they have responsibilities too. So, and that's the way that most cities handle it. So it is doable. It would take a code, I would recommend a code amendment, so anybody that reads our code understands the rules, versus going to a standard detail, which is what we have now. So it's all laid out in the code, and we have a recordable document that lays out the expectations and understanding between the city and the individual property owner.
What is the cost difference to deal with this when it's a paver driveway versus a concrete? I mean, I'm trying to understand the...
From our perspective, or from the homeowner's perspective?
No, not the installation. I'm talking about, so you're saying that if the city has to go do it, it's at the, typically I would assume, let's start with this. If it's a concrete driveway, you have to do work.
Yep.
It causes damage to the surface of the driveway. Would the city then repair that damage at their cost?
Yes.
Okay. So if a homeowner's got a paver driveway, they sustain damage because you're doing work. What would be the cost? Is there a true deviation of cost between fixing a paver driveway versus a concrete driveway?
Yes, because we don't have the ability in-house to do pavers. We have people that work in concrete, so we'd have to contract that out. So we'd have to...
But do we know, I mean, is that a significant... I'm just trying to understand the basis for the...
I know that when I did my pavers, my paver contractor charged me to come back and do some repairs, $500 for a half day, $1,000 for a full day's work. So...
And are you going to be able to match up the pavers? Also, you had to go out
but we did
match up the pavers and spend time getting them.
What's the...
And if we did damage it, typically we would put it back. If we'd come through, pull up the paver, repair the water line, if the owner didn't want the pavers back, we would just put concrete down and go on our way.
At your own, at the
city's cost, yeah, because that's the policy. That's
so I think
the first piece.
That was my question would be, if we do something like this, if this, to the homeowner standpoint, you would give them the option to say, either you put it back at your cost, or the city will put back a concrete at our cost.
Yes.
So I've seen driveways that are pervious driveways, and what they'll do is they'll have like pavers and square, but then in the middle they'll have like a little square of sand or gravel or whatever. Would that be allowed under this?
We'd have to, as we wrote the code, we'd have to figure out what we're going to allow in our right of way. I think pavers seem to be the biggest thing.
I just see that as like if I was walking my dog, it's easy to stumble over something like that. If you know.
Well, it still have to meet all requirements, all slope requirements of DOT and the state. But
so you mean like somebody? I'm just trying to like somebody who's put in like one of those gravel driveways all the way down.
No. So that what they do is they'll have like a driveway with pavers, but then to make it pervious, they leave open areas all the way down.
Gaps.
Yeah, and it's either gravel or grass and
fake grass.
I think one thing, I asked a similar question when I was meeting with Mark that Mr. Wild did about just what that meant for the city. And the only other thing that I thought came of that is that there is some sort of difference in terms of time investment of our employees for taking up pavers, which is our responsibility, like if they needed to come up. And that's a cost differential that's quantified more by like the time of our employees, if that makes sense.
That's a good point.
And would this be, when you were talking, did this come up like if you did that, if you have a paver driveway that's 20 years old versus, so you didn't know that there would be a distinction between your cost or not to put it back? Do you know if cities deal with it differently? I mean, so we implemented this code change, I read it, but 2020 was?
Yeah.
Okay. So if you did a paver driveway in 1990, how do you deal with it?
I think what we do is we write the code for what it is now, and we treat everybody the same as we go forward. If you have an existing paver driveway, you're still there because we're allowing you to be there. there. So you have to follow the rules within our right-of-way, and we just establish those rules and apply them equally.
I mean, I guess this just becomes more relevant if we start talking about undergrounding of power, that assuming that will happen within that first 5 feet, so that becomes, I can see this becoming a real issue. I know it's been pushed back from what I hear.
And there's no sidewalks over there. When we talked about this coming up on this agenda a couple of weeks ago, and I thought in my mind's eye, there's not that many people that have pavers, but then I drove down Domerick Drive, where the property values are a bit higher than my end of Domerick, and there were lots of pavers, and there are no sidewalks at all, or in the area where I was. And so I do think if there were sidewalks put there and or undergrounding or any combination of that, or some of these flooding problems that come up or whatever, if anything, that it does have potential to make a difference.
It'll get awkward, it'll get awkward if you've got sidewalk. I mean, it'll get to the point where it won't make sense to have a strip of pavers that is 2 feet. That would be the only thing I would say when we're talking about this 5 feet issue. If it's a street where there's no sidewalk, I don't see this as a huge issue either way. But it will get awkward when you've got paver driveways, marrying them to sidewalks, and then what do you do to put it back for that little apron part that goes up to the street?
Yeah.
But
But actually, I was thinking of it the other way around, in the sense that because there's no sidewalks, I was saying that because there's more potential that we will someday put them there, and if we do that, then that would make this an issue for anybody who had pavers all the way down, whereas if they did not, then it would not be the same issue in terms of, if that makes sense. Whereas there are parts over closer to where I live that do have the concrete down, under, I guess, the current policy or what have you, where it's paver. Frankly, I never noticed it, but I understand how a homeowner looks at their home differently than anybody else.
Is there any other part of town that we're putting sidewalks in the next couple of years,
Well,
or just
ultimately, budget provided the first round through, according to our Mike Fed master plan, we're trying to get a sidewalk within 1 block of every resident as we work through the entire city. Ultimately, as we come back around 20, 30, 40 years from now and continue the sidewalk program, there'll be a sidewalk on both sides of every street. But we've got our work cut out for us just to get them on one side.
So can I ask a question about logistics? Because I can get comfortable with the idea that, you know, there's a certain amount of assumption of the risk, I guess, with this. But because we had a policy change, are we enforcing it equally with people who have had their existing pavers for 10, 15 years versus people who are putting them in now? Are we going back and notifying? Like, what would be the foreseeable outcome if we were to do this? Are we going to be knocking on doors and telling people, hi, you have had a violating paver driveway for the last 10 years. We're just letting you know that, because if you decide to do anything, here are your options? Or like, how would we work through that?
Well, I think, well, if anybody permitted their paver driveways in the past prior to the new code change, they were required to sign the paver letter.
Okay.
So they knew what the risk. If they didn't get a permit,
Yeah.
that's on them.
Totally.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so, I mean, I had a sidewalk put through my front yard several years ago, 3 or 4 years ago. And so that was an example. My next door neighbor had his pavers all the way down to the street, as did I. And we put in a paver driveway 10 years ago. And he desperately wanted the sidewalk to stop at the pavers and then have his paver driveway and then pick up on the other side. Maybe we could walk across that. And he lost that argument in the city. The city took up his pavers and put a driveway through it. He moved away. So there we go. But he just couldn't believe that he couldn't have his pavers all the way to the street. I succumbed as well, and it's not so bad. I mean, my pavers now go to within 5 feet, and there's a sidewalk that abuts the street, and there's no strip or anything, so it's the first 5 feet, and it's fine. I mean, I think that's doable. But I think if you, I've seen some other driveways where you're coming 12 or 15 feet up into the yard. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense to me. So although the right-of-way is a good clean line to call it at, it's not always, applicable to, or a good fit with others. So I'm happy with the first one. I think if we could, my suggestion would be, we would ask Mark to bring back a code change, and then we can take a vote on it, and the direction I would like to give is to look at the code change and the policy, and then we can hash it out when it comes back for us.
You know what, because Mark made a good point, because a lot of people, I personally know people in Maitland who just put in a driveway, they don't go get the permit, right? So I think doing that would be a great thought, so I would support that also.
So the first time I got to notice this, it was a woman who lived over in Trotters, and she was going to have to put concrete in the first 11 feet, and she was, so I just drove over there just to see it. It's kind of like, Laura was saying. I figured, well, there are not that many driveways, and I drove around that little circle, and she was the only one. There were 13 total. 13 of them all came down to the street. And I don't know if they ever got permitted or not, but there were lots more paver drivers than you think. And she was the odd one that had to push the concrete all the way up. So it just seems kind of out. I think we're going to end up with kind of a hopscotch of neighborhoods if we're requiring everybody now to go to the right of way before you can go all the way to the street. If we end up somewhere in the first 5 feet, I don't think that's an egregious change.
I think it's fascinating how many different approaches there are to this. My favorite would be Orange County, who wants to be listed as an additional insured on the policy. That's kind of insane, but I think a document in recordable form giving notice, I think is absolutely the bare minimum of necessity, but I think it covers us very well.
Okay. Well, does that do it, Mark?
So we have a consensus to move forward. Well, and we haven't even taken a stab at crafting language, so we'll be working with Drew on that, just make sure it all works. All right.
All right. Let's move on to reports. And Mr. City Attorney of the night.
The only thing I have to say tonight is good news. So we did get the payment in for the attorney's fees in Peacock Court, so that has been paid. The wire was today, so we'll be dismissing the motion for attorney's fees by tomorrow. That was all the best we report on.
Wow, that's awesome. Good work. Mr. City Manager?
Just one thing, I talked to some of you about this today. We are kicking off, we've set the schedule for the public involvement portion of the library project. So we'll be looking at June 28th and 29th for our initial meetings. On the 28th, entire public will be invited. It's going to take place in this room. Just to have an open session on what you would like to see in the library. It's going to be run by our architects. So if we move forward with the library, it's what would you like to see in it? It's going to be an interactive session, sort of a variation of the dot game, which I think almost everything when it comes to a charrette format is a variation of the dot game now, where the participants will be shown images of what is contained within libraries that have been built recently to get their reactions to it. There'll be boards set up around the room so they can write down their reaction and go put it on whatever element of the library that correlates to that picture. Then the architects will collect that to see where the public's sense is of what they'd like to see in a library, and to pull that together. There'll be 2 sessions, one in the morning, one in the afternoon. Since we're working here in the summertime, we want to give an opportunity for people that are home during the day, have dropped their kids off at daycare or camps this summer, to be able to participate during a daytime session. Then one at 6:30 in the evening for folks at work, so they can come in and participate in the evening. So we have 2 sessions on the 28th. As we work through the 28th and 29th, we're also going to be able to have an online session too. So if people cannot make it to the 28th or 29th, that there will be an online session they can participate in, look at the same images and give their impressions, their reactions to those to help inform the process as we move through it. On the 29th will be a similar exercise, but in that exercise we'll be looking more inside the building in terms of how spaces work inside the building. probably more stakeholders will be involved in a session like that. It's a small group session where people will be working on tabletops to look at how the internal functioning of the library works as far as how areas interact with each other. Those will then be presented at the end. Again, we'll be doing 2 sessions, a daytime and an evening session, to allow everyone that wants to be involved. We'll be following up on all of this with additional surveys, which was in the scope of service, to cast the widest net possible and get the most involvement in this process that we can. As far as city council involvement goes, what we would like to see is that you would, if you can make time to attend any or all of these sessions as observers, so you can sort of move around the room, listen to what's going on, have chats with people about what their feelings are. On the tabletop, you can walk from table to table to see how people are putting their ideas together, and then watch the presentations at the end to help, again, inform the process. Since you'll be the final decision makers on that, I think that's probably the biggest benefit, to see how it all works together versus having you participate and sit at a table and not have the benefit of hearing what's happening at other tables or in other parts of the room. So that's how we're going to be kicking it off. We've already, the first notices have gone out for the 28th meeting. We're still putting final touches on the 29th meeting. So we're going around all channels, all social media channels, web page, email list that we've accumulated to, again, like I said, cast the widest net possible to get the most involvement in this process. So just the beginning, but I think it will certainly allow as much input as we could possibly have into this. So you make the best
Just a
decision.
dumb question, but are we checking IDs at the door, or are we just letting the public?
It's just the public, because it is a Maitland Public Library, but people from out, there are users of the library that are outside of the city.
Right.
So
I know.
Yeah.
Our social media does cast a very wide net, because Robert does such a very good job.
yes. Yeah. And our partners will be putting it out. Once we put it out on our channels, I have no doubt that the library is going to share it through their channels. Art and history museums are going to share it on their channels. So it'll cast a wide net. That's why the first session is going to be more of a wide open session to let everyone participate. The second one, we're going to focus a little bit more on stakeholders, because you have to have some knowledge of how a building functions. So it'll be a little more staff heavy, with library folks involved, a little more staff involved, and A&H staff involved, and then public also, but people that understand how the process works to help facilitate those discussions at the individual tables, along with the architects. So that's our plan and process. So at the end of this month, we'll have some good input on where we go with this project.
Are we going in with an assumption? I'll say, I thought that in the last presentations we went in with we had already gotten to the finish line in many ways of how big this building was going to be. I'm assuming, are we going to try to do this in a way where
This is all going to be
taking a very preliminary step? Because I would like to see it more not here's what we're going to do, tell us how we're going to fill it. It would be more of what do you want to see, and
it's going to be,
and then building that size of the building and the scale as to based on that input.
Yeah, and that's the approach that we've laid out for the architects, is that if we're going to do a library, what would you like to see in it, and how would that work together? Is the approach we're taking. And what comes out of that, ultimately it lands in your laps up here to decide how that works.
And you and I talked about this. I just thought the last time it was, are we going to build a 24,500 square foot building or a 24,700 square foot building? We were already at the end, in my opinion, before we even got started.
Yeah, so when we did the site analysis, yes. And the input we get now the result will be the size of the building we need. Because there are some basic things that you need within a building, and the office spaces for the staff. How many staff do you have? How much space do you have? Things like that. Bathroom spaces that will dictate it. But then there's the larger spaces, the areas for small meetings, for study groups, for collections, for reference, for computers. That we're trying to get. What we'll be trying to do is get a feel for what the people that are involved in the library, which I'm assuming will be the people who are showing up, would like to see or not see within a building like that. So that's our first light on it. So that's all I have. And we'll be communicating with you directly it'll be out there. So if you're watching any of our channels or checking out the webpage, it'll be there. But we will be communicating directly with the city council to make sure you're clued in. So when that comes up 2 weeks from now, you'll be aware of it. Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Mark.
You're welcome.
City council member reports. Anybody have?
Yeah, I got some map notes from the other day. So we all know the new 414 is scheduled to start construction here probably about 25, 26. One of the things that they're looking to do is add 3.9 miles of bike trails to that when they start building it. So that's good. So we've always been worried about a connector out there, so that would be helpful, especially to the west side. We're looking to replace. There's also looking to replace the master arms at Horatio and Maitland in 2026, 27. I'm sure you knew that already. This one was kind of interesting to me. So Edgewater and Forest City Road area, they're looking to widen to 4 lanes. That's going to be started in 2026. Also, the 4-laning of Kennedy from Wymore to Forest City. That's projected to be finished in that's on their CIP to be projected in 2026, but all this is based on gasoline tax dollars. So that's why it's taking so long. That was my question, is like, why does 1.8 miles take, 7 years to do? So it's all based on just getting that top tax dollar. So everybody who drives electric cars are killing it. Yeah.
Free ride.
That's right. Sunrail Bridge replacement over 1792. That starts in 2024-25. I did sit down with Phil Anderson the other day and just chatted him about, the connector bridge. And I told him, I said, I know we're all working on it, but he said over there, everybody's on board. They would love to see that happen too. So, I know that there's some FDOT people at the MAC, so I'm going to try to just remind them and talk to them when I'm down there, try to push it a little bit. And that is it.
Okay. Well, thank you for doing that. You go in the back and report to us.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Going once, going twice? City clerk? Report?
I just want to say thank you. This year and a half in Central Florida has been wonderful news for my family, so thank you for welcoming me, and I really enjoyed it.
Well, I'm glad you're here. Okay, well, I think that's it. We're adjourned.